Hey guys, what is going on? It is Brooke, or the Undead DM, back at it again with another video for you today. And in this episode, we're going to be going over the first of 4 different subclasses for the Shaman class that I have reviewed in the past few videos. And that is going to be Exorcism. Now, if you like this episode, please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more. And with that, we're going to get right into it. So, exorcism says here that it is the practice of hunting and banishing extraplanar entities that seek to spread their evil into the prime material. And they are exorcists. So, yes. Typically exorcisms are performed on people who have entities or things wrong with them that are extraplanar or otherwise not of this material world. This is correct. And these things can be good or bad. But we're going to get into that. So, Exorcist lore at 2nd level. So, all shamans pick their spiritual practice at level 2. Not level 1, which is a little bit strange considering how a lot of shamans in folklore and history typically go into a general practice, but they also practice a more specific form of their shamanism, or their shaman practice, however you want to call it. So why they pick it at 2nd level instead of 1st is a little bit strange, but I can see it. So at 2nd level you get Exorcist lore, where you get proficiency in religion, and you can use a holy symbol as your spellcasting focus. And if you already are proficient in religion, you choose another skill from the shaman list. So if you haven't seen the core class video, I'll link that in the description. I'd recommend checking that out to see how I feel about the generalist class. But additionally, with Exorcist lore, whenever you make a religion check for the purposes of determining the rites required to end a possession or banish an aberration, celestial, elemental, fey, fiend, or undead from the material plane, it is doubled. Now, I get the flavor of this. However, I, as a dungeon master of several years, whenever there is an extraplanar being, have never asked my party members to roll religion, to banish it specifically. Because if you want to know what kind of creature it is, then I'd make you roll history. If you know it's some kind of yokai or spirit of some kind, then I would have you roll religion to see if it's part of a religion that you are aware of. But never have I ever had somebody cast banishment, which is a spell you can have access to with the base Shaman class, by the way, and ask them to roll religion before they banish it. Never. So the fact that an entire spell can just negate this entirely is dumb. I don't get it. But banishing brand is what we're gonna cover now. So you can mark creatures with a spiritual brand meant to repel them. As a bonus action, magically mark a creature you can see within 30 feet. It remains for a minute, or until you lose concentration, or until you use it again. And whenever you deal damage to the marked creature, or when you deal damage to the marked target with a weapon attack or shaman spell, it deals an additional d6 force damage to them. And when the marked creature is reduced to 0, if the target is native to a different plane of existence than the one that they're on, or the one that you're on, the target is banished to its home plane and cannot return from which they are banished by any means short of wish for 24 hours. And once you mark a creature with this feature, you cannot do so again until you finish a long rest. Alternatively, you can expend a spell slot of 1st level or higher to do this again. So essentially, this is Hunter's Mark, but if the creature dies, instead of being able to move the mark, it just banishes the creature. And the mark only lasts for 1 minute. The one good thing I will give this over Hunter's Mark is that it just says when the marked target is reduced to 0 hit points, not if you reduce the target to 0. So that means you can mark the target and just kind of forget about them until your allies get rid of them, and then you can just use the mark again. But I assume, based on this wording, that the minute time still carries over since the mark only lasts, or the mark remains on the target for a minute, or until you use this feature again. So yeah, you can just move the target again as a bonus action. But you can't, so I don't know why this is even here. I guess this is meant to be like a sort of ping pong effect where you smack one dude, you mark him, and then if he dies, you can move it if he only died on the first round. Because it says once you mark a creature with this feature, you cannot do so again until you finish a long rest. This can mean one of two things. Either if you mark the creature and then you realize that the marked creature isn't really that much of a priority target, and instead you move the mark to the boss, but then the boss dies and you want to move it back to the original creature, you can't. Because you've already marked that creature with that feature before. Or, what this is trying to say is, once you have used this feature, you cannot do so again until you finish a long rest, which completely invalidates the use this feature again portion of the banishing brand. I would change one of two things depending on how you want this to work. I would just obviously make it, well, three things. Three things, and then two, I would make one of them mandatory, and then the other two you could choose between how you want this to work. So the one mandatory thing I would change is change the bonus action to on hit. Just like any other effect that the ranger gets with their subclasses, where most of them are whenever you hit a creature you could do this, it'd be a lot better. Obviously keep the damage. I would also probably remove the concentration, but then again you'd probably have to add a clause in here that states that you can only have one of these marks up at a time, but if you want to keep it as concentration, that's fine. What needs to change is either you need to make it so that you can use this feature a number of times equal to proficiency or to your charisma per long rest, or you can expend the first level spell slot to do it again, or you change it to you can move it and then you increase the duration from 1 minute to 10 minutes, but you can only use this feature once per long rest, or by expending a spell slot of first level or higher. This way, it either makes it so that this feature can be used once every long rest for free, and it lasts for 10 minutes, or you can use it more than once, but each one only lasts 1 minute, and they get back on a long rest, but both of them still allow you to use a first level spell slot to do it again. Either way, it needs to change somehow. At 6th level, you get Hunter Protector, where you always have Detect Evil and Good and Protection from Evil and Good prepared as ritual spells, and they don't count against the number of ritual spells you can prepare per day. Now, in the previous episode where I was talking about the spirit guides, I said that a lot of the spirits, if you want to make your own, that you have to account for some of the subclasses requiring you to make different features for the subclass that is going to be using it. This is one of them. So you get Guided Brand. Your Banishing Brand becomes suffused with the power of the spirits. While you are channeling a spirit guide, your mark gains additional effects for the duration. If such effect requires a save, you use your spell save DC, and once you reach 18th level in this class and can channel 2 spirit guides simultaneously, your mark gains both spirit guide effects. So let's go over them. Air Spirit, the first time during each of your turns that the mark deals damage to the target is also pushed 10 feet straight, 10 feet in a straight line away from you if it is large or smaller. This is bad because it requires it to be large or smaller, which a lot of creatures are going to be in earlier levels. It's also only 10 feet, which is still good, but it's the first time during each of your turns. And the mark already only does damage on your turn. Yeah, when you deal damage to the target with a weapon. Oh, nope, it's whenever. So you can potentially get this to trigger more than once. But since it's only the first time during each of your turns, you really can only get this once. If it was just whenever, this would actually be pretty good. Instead, it's the first time, meaning you can only push them 10 feet. That's it. It's still fine, but it'd be better if it was either whenever you deal damage or they got pushed further. Ancestral Spirit, the first time during each of your turns when you deal damage to the target with the mark, you could choose one creature you could see within 30 feet, and during the chosen creature's next turn, the first time the creature deals damage to the marked target, they deal an additional d6 force damage. So basically, Ancestral Spirit gives your ally the ability to trigger the mark, but only once. Which is fine, I guess. It's not necessarily game breaking. It's not good, but it's not bad. Animal Spirit, advantage on perception or survival checks to track down the marked target, and not being able to see the target doesn't impose disadvantage on attack rolls against it. So you can essentially negate the effects of invisibility or anything like that, and you also have advantage on tracking them if they try to run away. Okay. It'd be better if you just always knew where they were, like Hunter's Mark does, but okay. The Benevolent Spirit. The first time during each of your turns that the mark deals damage to the target, you can cause a creature within 30 feet of you to regain a number of hit points equal to the damage dealt. Again, it's not good, but it's not bad either. It's kind of mid. It would be better if it healed double the amount because it's only a d6, and when Cure Wounds heals a d8, and yeah, sure, Healing Word heals only a d4. They all heal an amount plus your spellcasting modifier in hit points. This just heals the amount of damage. So it's just a flat d6. It's innately worse. Earth Spirit, the first time during each of your turns that the mark deals damage, the target must succeed a strength save or be knocked prone. And if the target is knocked prone with this feature, you can cause the ground within 10 feet of it to become difficult terrain for a minute. This is bad, because it doesn't exclude you or your allies from being affected by the difficult terrain. You just create difficult terrain. Meaning, you essentially just made it harder for your melee people to get into range of a target that they would like to get into range of. Congratulations. Never pick this one. Fire Spirit, the first time during each of your turns that the mark deals damage, it also takes an additional d6 fire damage. Pretty standard, just more damage. It's probably one of the better ones, but it's fire damage. And once again, Fire Spirit doesn't allow you to nullify resistance to fire damage as an innate thing, so it's not going to come up that often later. It's kind of useful early, though. The Lost Spirit. The first time during each of your turns that the mark deals damage, the target must succeed an intelligence save or suffer the effects of the Confusion spell, which, in case you don't know, basically means that they have to walk randomly in one of the 8 squares around them. They don't have any control of their movement. So every time they have to move 5 feet, they essentially have to roll a d8, and whatever number it lands on, based on how your dungeon master is mapping out the numbers, that's the direction they move in. It does other things too, but I can't remember them all off the top of my head. But I think it's a 3rd level spell for a 2nd level feature, which you won't even get access to the spell Confusion until 5th level anyway. So essentially getting a 5th level spell at 2nd level is a pretty good one, and not a lot of creatures at this level are going to have high intelligence saves. So it's pretty good. The Malevolent Spirit, the first time during each of your turns that the mark deals damage, they must make a Wisdom save or become frightened. Again, this is a better early, not so good later, because a lot of creatures are either going to be immune to Frighten or just resistant to the Frighten effect. The Mischievous Spirit. When you mark the target, or as a bonus action on your turn, you can cause the marked creature to create a harmless sensory effect, and the next attack roll made against the target is made with advantage. This doesn't say the next attack roll you make, it's just the next attack roll, which can help your allies, but it can also help yourself. Not very good, but again, turning a 65% chance to hit to around an 86% is good. It doesn't really up your damage all that much, but it's still helpful in certain situations. But it's only on the first attack. It's not all attacks. It'd be better if it was all, but whatever. Mournful Spirit. The first time each of your turns that the mark deals damage, the target must make a wisdom save or become charmed. Again, much like the Malevolent Spirit, charm is good for early game, not so much for late game. Vengeful Spirit. When the marked target deals damage to you, you can use your reaction to make an attack against them or cast a Shaman cantrip, and the cantrip must deal damage and have a casting time of 1 action. So, in a later episode, we'll get over the Shaman cantrips, and the Shaman spells, and not a lot of them are good, but this requires the marked target to deal damage to you, not even attack you, which is different because this is essentially going from he is attacking you, as in he's already rolled to hit, but he hasn't rolled damage yet. Then you could do this as a reaction. Thus, if you have something like the Air Spirit, you could push them away. But since this is after they deal damage to you, it's kind of pointless. Because, yeah, you're getting some retaliatory damage, but you're not preventing the damage in any way. Because it also, remember, the cantrip must deal damage and have a casting time of an action. So, sure, you could probably cast, like, Eldritch Blast if you have it, if you're multi-classed into Warlock, but you can't do that because it has to be a Shaman cantrip. Again, they're just limiting this class more and more with multi-classing. The Warrior Spirit. You gain a +1 bonus to your attack and damage rolls against the marked target. If this was a higher bonus, I'd be okay with it, but it's not. And the Water Spirit. The first time during each of your turns that the mark does damage to the target, they must make a con save, or their speed is halved until the end of the next turn. Or until the end of its next turn. Having speed is pretty good. But one thing that I have neglected to say here is that these are all just baseline effects. They don't get anything for later levels. And that's it. You only can push them 10 feet with the Air Spirit. You only get a +1 with Warrior Spirit. You don't get any other bonuses for later levels. They don't upgrade like cantrips do, which sucks. I say it sucks because there's a later subclass here that actually has benefits for later levels. Granted, it's 18th level, or really late, like a later level, but it still has something. This has nothing. And finally, at 14th level, Threshold Guardian. You always have Dispel Evil and Good prepared. It doesn't count against the number of spells you can prepare each day. And whenever you cast Dispel Evil and Good as a ritual, each of the spell's effects also affects aberrations for the duration, and the spell doesn't end early until you have used its special functions 3 times in any combination. So, for a capstone subclass ability, that's not good. Sure, the spell might be okay. I haven't fully read what the spell Good and Evil does. But the fact that you only get one spell, it doesn't count against the number of spells that you know, which is the same thing that you got at 6th level with Detect Evil and Protection from Evil and Good. But on top of that, whenever you cast it as a ritual, it affects one other creature type, and it doesn't end unless you use 3 of its functions. And what's even interesting is that this isn't once per day. So you can just use this whenever you want. So the good is that it's not once per day, it doesn't have a charge limit, and you could use this pretty much as many times as you want in one adventuring day if you have the time to spare. But on the other hand, It's just a spell. That's it. You don't get anything else. For your epic subclass final ability, you just get a spell. That's it. Overall, pretty mediocre subclass. It doesn't do anything that the Horizon Walker doesn't do. From the Ranger, it doesn't do anything that both of the Watchers for Paladin doesn't do. It doesn't do anything better than any other spellcaster with banishment. Even the base Shaman is better at banishing things than the Exorcism subclass. Because it just, with the right spell, with a right spirit guide, just gets banishment. Like, sure, marking something for a minute and dealing additional damage, and then if they drop to 0, get banished is fine and all. And banishment is a save. But one is an action spell, the other one is a bonus action. A feature. Both of them choose one target. Both of them require concentration for a minute. But one gets rid of them right now if they fail, and the other one you have to wait for X amount of rounds until they drop to 0, and then they're banished, which at that point it's basically useless. Like, sure, if they may have a thing that they could get back up, fine. But they're already unconscious, or dead in a lot of cases. So why does banishing them matter? In very, very specific situations where you have like a necromancer who's using corpses from different planes of existence, and then you knock out one of the corpses and they have this brand on them and they just get banished to a different plane, sure, that's good. But when are you ever going to run into that? Not a lot. A lot of the times, dungeon masters are going to run giant dungeons, and there's going to be a few rooms with just one big boss guy, and then once the big boss guy is defeated, that's it. He's not going to get back up unless he has some kind of epic second phase or some kind of BS revival ability or something along those lines. Most of the time, once you defeat him, he's dead. So banishing him doesn't do anything. And we're also not going to forget to mention that because he's unconscious, he can't resist it, meaning that if you banish the boss when it dies, you cannot collect any of his loot because his body is no longer there. So congratulations, you just screwed over your party of boss loot from the boss because his body's now gone. Oh, but you can dismiss it before the brand takes effect. You never know when it's going to take effect. And by that point, the DM has already said, oh, it's banished. And then you're just like, oh, well, Mr. DM, could I have dismissed it before? And a lot of DMs, they're going to be cool about it, and they'll be like, sure, I'll allow it, the boss's body doesn't disappear. But if you're like me, and knowing what your abilities do as a player is very important, and you have to keep track of that as a dungeon master already, if the player forgets, and they screw over their party in the process, that's their fault. That they should have either worded it better or they should have remembered it. So, this feature inadvertently fucks over your team. Overall, the subclass is not good. Its features are pretty weak. Its one unique thing is done better by a 3rd level spell. Any of the unique things that it tries to do with its 10th level feature, a lot of them aren't very useful, and its capstone ability is just a spell. Overall, it's pretty weak. Well, that is going to be all for this episode of the subclass review for the Shaman. In the next episode, we're going to be covering the second subclass, Sympathicism, and we're going to go over what makes that such a interesting subclass to play. If you like this episode, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you all in the next episode. Latest.